Welcome back to the Purpose of Money podcast, where we talk about all things money and how to build generational wealth. I'm super excited today because we are joined by my buddy Zach. He is a software developer, entrepreneur, a husband, a father to two young boys, and he is changing the way we handle money. So you know this is one of my favorite topics. In elementary school, his friends built their own economic system in the backyard called Newtopia. And in college, he made over $1,000 recycling beer cups at a music festival to fund his study abroad. As an entrepreneur, his passion is to help others be intentional with their finances so that they can build a life that aligns with their values. And recently, he did something amazing. We're going to talk about his platform, My Budget Coach, and much more. So let's hop into this combo. Hey, Zach, how you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Good. I'm excited to have you on the show. I didn't want to mess it up, but tell me, what is your full name?
Yeah, it's Zach Whelchel.
Whelchel. Where is your family from?
Let's see. My family is from Kentucky, so we live in Kentucky currently. Yeah,
All right. I love it. I can't remember. I've been to Kentucky when I went to Indiana, but it was very short and just over the border. And then I always wanted to go to Kentucky Derby. Oh, I've been to Kentucky more than once, actually. But I didn't get to hang out too long. So tell me a little bit more about you and your family. One of the things I love to ask my guests, especially when they like to talk about money, is what was money like for you when you were growing up?
for sure. Yeah, so I'll tell you a little bit about my family. So my wife and I have two young kids. We have a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old. They're 14 months apart, which I don't know if I'd recommend that at this point. I've had people tell me like if you would have twins, twins are easier than like the 2-under-2 split. Just because at least they're in the same stage of life together. I don't know if that's true, but yeah. So let's see. We really value traveling and experiences. In the last few years, we've been trying to teach our kids and take our kids with us. We've already taken our kids to the country of Georgia and Greece. We lived in London last year for 3 months, which was a really cool experience. But yeah, as far as like my childhood growing up and like what money was like for me, I grew up in, I guess, a middle class, probably straight middle class family in kind of rural Kentucky, and I don't remember us ever having too much money or ever. Sometimes money was tight. It was kind of more of that mindset, but for whatever reason, as a kid, I was always a saver. Even as a young child, like my mentality was always like the scarcity mindset of we have to save, we have to save, we have to save. So I don't know if I got that from my kind of family environment or if something else instilled that in me, but that's just kind of how I've always been.
Understood, understood. And that kind of sticks with us. So it's very interesting how you grew up to then help people with their money. But you definitely said something that sparked my interest, and I want to talk about it. You said that you and your family spent 3 months in London living abroad. I want to know, how did you come to the decision to do that? And what types of financial decisions did you make that possible? Because as someone who spent 15 years in the foreign service as a diplomat and lived abroad with my family, now as a full-time entrepreneur, I want to incorporate a 3-month sabbatical somewhere. And I would
Cool.
love to talk about how you can plan for that, especially when you have a family of four, just like I do.
Yeah, so this was my wife and I. We like to say that like we don't just say we're like we actually do, right? So if we have this idea that just lingers for enough time, it's like okay, we either need to just take action and do it, or we need to just kind of admit like that's not a plan that's going to happen. And this is one that we had wanted to do for several years, and we just said, you know what, like we're going to have to prioritize this if we're going to make it happen. So we're big fans of this idea of we don't want to just work really hard our whole lives and then retire to enjoy our life only when we're older, right? I'd rather split that up and take some time off work throughout life, especially having kids. I mean, my nature is always, like I said earlier, save and delay gratification and just like do whatever we can that's hard today to make tomorrow better. But when you have kids and like this is the only time my children are this age, right? This is the only time they're this small and at home full time, it really helps you swing back more towards like living in the moment. So basically we just decided we were going to do it. So my work at the time was good enough that they said like, yeah, you could do this. I worked as a consultant and I was between projects. So we just saved and saved and saved until we could take about 3 months off, and we were definitely burning cash. Like we were living at a deficit. London is very expensive, but we saved up for it and we prioritized it. And I'm so glad we did. Like the time as a family and just getting to spend that time with my young children was so worth it. So
I
would
love
recommend if you
it.
can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming, was it in the summer? You said the kids are not in school and you have more freedom. So what time of year did you choose to go?
Yeah, I think we started in May last year, so it was just about a year ago now. But yeah, we had a little bit of a built-in community because we went to kind of be a part of a church there that was like a sister church with the church that we go to in Kentucky. So at least we like already knew some people and like we had a community we could dive into. So it was a good fit.
That makes a world of difference. And I love that you could go to another country and already have a church that you can be involved in, as well as a community of people who can help you get settled. London is one of my favorite cities. It's not one I lived in, but trust me, living in Dubai was super expensive. So I know what it's like to live somewhere that's not cheap.
Yeah,
So, so that's so interesting.
my aunt and uncle lived in Dubai, so I've been there a couple times, and yes,
Yeah.
it is very, very expensive.
It is, and it's always something fun to do, and you just gotta want to pay for it. So I definitely can relate to that. And so I'm curious to know, you mentioned your family, a scarcity mentality is something you kind of grew up to know and to kind of embrace. Not really sure if it originated from being in your family or not, but now you have a love for budgeting and helping people discover how to budget their money. Where did this passion for personal finances come from?
Yeah, I'd say like again, like I've always had this weird kind of mentality with money, or maybe like against the common way that my friends were or whatever. I've always been a saver, and I've always tried to be really intentional with how I spend my money as well. And budgeting never really clicked for me until a few years ago when we discovered kind of a different way of budgeting called zero-based budgeting, or people refer to it as like the envelope method. And about 4 years ago, I was starting a different company at that time, and I actually exited that company, and so I was without a job, and we were just about to have our first child, and we were trying to decide like who's going to stay home with the kid, like all those things, and money was tight at that point, and so when we discovered kind of this new way of budgeting in that time, it really clicked, and since then we've just been it felt like we had like a vehicle to actually teach people to be intentional with their money. So we became those people that just had to tell all of our friends and family. We started teaching classes at our church. We taught like younger couples that had just gotten married, older couples, everybody in between, and it's just been a passion of ours. It's something we've done kind of just out of the love of it for years, and finally got to that point where we saved enough money to quit my job, start this company full time, and really try to make a company out of it.
That's a really good point, and I was actually going to get to that. So you took the leap. You are now a full-time entrepreneur and business owner, and you are working on what you're most passionate about. But how long did you plan for that transition? And I'd love to hear some of your tips that really, really worked. I know you said you saved, but was there anything else you did to stay motivated while you were pursuing your goal to go full-time?
Yeah, so I will say that like most of my career has been entrepreneurial. So when I got out of college, I started a couple of different companies, and I've failed a lot too, right? I've started things and they've fallen over, and I started two companies that were like mildly successful and exited one of those before going to my full time job that I just had for the last 3 years. But yeah, I'd say that I'm used to kind of this lifestyle. I'm used to kind of this like bootstrapping and kind of making things from the ground up, but it is very, very hard and very stressful. It's a roller coaster. Like anybody out there who's done the entrepreneurial thing, it is very much a roller coaster. And the highs are very high and the lows are very low, right? So for us, yeah, I think we kind of always had it in the back of our head that we would probably come back this route, just because it's this is what makes me feel alive. This is what I feel passionate about is, picking something that I think really could help people and giving it my all to try to build that so that, I can have a kind of a positive impact in the world. So as far as preparing for this, yeah, we saved a ton. We lived way below our means for years and years. So anytime we would increase our income, we would just not increase our lifestyle. Another trick that we did that was like super beneficial for us is every time we moved houses, and I guess it's only been 3 times, but we would always keep the previous house. So we would never buy such a big house that we couldn't afford to keep it and move on. And we would just rent out those properties at this point. So now we have two properties that we rent out, and that gives us a little bit more stability.
I love it. And that's one of my favorite things to do too, because I tell people when you live in a house, it's a lot easier to rent it because you know what the problems are, and you know what it's like living there. But if it's a good house and a good market, it's also always rentable. And that's some passive income that'll benefit you. My husband and I did the same thing. His first condo he bought in 2006, and we still own it, and it is just occupied by a tenant, and we've been having a tenant in it since we moved to Dubai in 2012, and then we came back in 2015, and all we've had to do was maintain repairs on the home and make sure that it's rented. So I totally agree with your strategy to live in a house, and then as you upgrade or change homes, that you just rent out the one you have, so they will eventually, hopefully they're paying for themselves. Hopefully you're in rental markets where the rent is more than covering the mortgage and the expenses too. So that still allows you some great opportunity. So, do you plan to expand in real estate further than that? Or are you just using the strategy of if we move, we'll rent our current home?
Yeah, I don't know that's like a hard and fast rule. It's just something that's always worked out. We've also always bought our houses off the market. So whenever we look on Zillow, like Zillow's changed recently, you have to go and switch a tab to look at things that aren't listed by a realtor. But we found that that's how you can go and find things that not many people are seeing and that often you can get good deals on. So this second house that we bought was kind of off the market. It was listed by an owner, and it had a lot of damage to it. It had a lot of like animal like damage, so we had to like rip out carpets and put stuff on the hardwood and all of that. And really, the full 2 years that we lived there, we were working on it. Like we figured out when we moved in that there was a gas leak, and I like ripped out sections of the walls and sprayed the little bubble soap on things and pumped it up to figure out where it was, and like eventually got that all fixed. So it takes a lot of effort, but yeah, I think it's worth it. So I don't know if we'll keep doing this moving forward. Also, I think it all comes down to the numbers, and the numbers right now are much harder with the interest rates, right? So we were like blessed to have been doing this in a really unique time in history where the interest rates were so low that we could, right? I don't know that we
Right.
could pull it off as easily now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, real estate is always a numbers game and it has to make sense. So I totally get that. Talking about numbers, I know you mentioned your passion for zero-based budgeting and how you taught others, but we didn't really get into what the heck is zero-based budgeting. And I always have to remember that some of my listeners are new to budgeting, to personal finance, and to the show. So let's take a quick sec to define what is zero-based budgeting and why is that your preferred choice? And then I might even share my favorite way to budget.
Oh, cool. Okay, yeah. So for a lot of people, budgeting, it's like a one and done thing. So they might think like, oh, okay, well, I made a spreadsheet this one time and I put my expenses down and I put my income and it was like mostly the same. And so like we're good, right? And to them, like just that act of making that one spreadsheet that one time is like a budget. For me, like that's not really budgeting. That's not like actually changing your habits and your lifestyle and kind of living according to your numbers. So to me, I really like zero-based budgeting. And like I mentioned earlier, it's kind of like the envelope system. So you can imagine you took every dollar that you owned from your bank and you just brought it home and you dumped it all out on the kitchen table, right? You had this big mound of cash on the kitchen table and you just said, we need a plan for all of that money, right? We don't want to just spend willy-nilly. We want to make sure that we're intentional with how we're spending. So you get out a bunch of envelopes and you start taking the cash and stuffing it in those envelopes until you get to the point where there's zero cash on the table because every cash has been assigned. And that zero cash on the table is why we call it zero-based budgeting. You want to get to the point where you always have a plan for your money and there's not like a discretionary fund or a slush fund. And the reason that's so powerful is because when you want to make a purchase, you can look at the envelope to see if you have enough money. So like say you're going out to eat and you have $50 left and you're going out to eat envelope, you know that you need to keep it under $50 because all of your other money is accounted for. You already have plans for all of it. And if you want to make a change, you can. If you want to say, actually, I want to eat out more than $50, but you have to choose which envelope to take that extra money from. And that choosing which envelope is like a real decision that you have to make, right? You can say, like, you know what, yeah, I do want to pull it from the clothing category in order to eat out more because eating out is worth it more to me than clothing. And that real trade off is something you can't do when you're just looking at your bank balance. Because a lot of people just look at their bank balance and they say, well, I think I can afford it because I've got 600 bucks in the bank. but they don't know like what that money's already accounted for, what they're going to need that money for. And so that's why I love this method, because you have a plan beforehand. You can make adjustments accordingly, but the plan beforehand gives you that peace that you know everything is accounted for.
Yes, absolutely. And I think you mentioned this briefly, but I want to elaborate on the point you made about so many people think budgeting is a bad word because you said it and you forget it, right? You made this one spreadsheet of all your expenses and you're supposed to stick to that. But I actually teach people that's not the truth. Like your budget should be changing on a monthly basis based on what's happening that month. And so, like, if it's a birthday month, if it's a vacation month, you might adjust your expenses to accommodate those things. And so you don't have to feel like I can't change anything because my budget from January said this and it has to stay the same for 12 months, because that's just not life. That's not realistic. But when you tell yourself, okay, January, February, March, I tend to have the same expenses, but on my birthday month, I'm going to take a trip. You can always put in your January, February, March budget money towards your trip to save for it. But then obviously the day or the month that you take your birthday trip, you might spend money beyond those regular expenses you had because it is a birthday trip, right? It's not something you do every month, but it is something you still should budget for. So I think that's the part that people get stuck on because they don't really think like, oh, yeah, I can make changes. I can adjust my clothing budget in 1 month and put that money towards fun and going to the movies because I want to treat myself or my son. Like for example, my son is finishing school this week and we're going to go check out a new movie on Saturday and order some food at the theater and just make it a whole like mommy Sunday. Well, that's like
Nice.
a part of my entertainment budget, but it is definitely only going to happen in June because he's not in school in July, he's not in school in August. And so you need to make adjustments. And I think that's what people get stuck on. That's why they're like, oh, I can't budget. Budget is so restricting. But I definitely feel like budgeting gives you power and control over your money. It lets you determine where it goes and it lets you see the numbers. So I really, really like that. And I want to know more about My Budget Coach. What is it? What inspired you to create it? And how can it be useful to me?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I guess you kind of know my love of budgeting, right? Like we fell in love with budgeting a few years ago. We started teaching all of our friends and family, and the thing we learned when we started teaching everybody is like budgeting is a skill. It's hard to learn, and sometimes like skills in life, like life changes, you need help along the way, right? So we found that our friends kind of needed us to stick with them. They needed us to check in on them, see how they were doing, and be there to answer those texts in the night of like how they need help budget categorizing this or figuring out if they can afford that. And over time, they kind of got it on their own. But basically, what we learned is people need a coach, and so this is kind of the first budgeting app. There are thousands of budgeting apps out there, by the way. There are so many different budgeting tools. But this is the first one that features coaches, right? So what we want to do is we want to connect everybody that signs up with a real life coach that can kind of help you get over that learning curve, encourage you, teach you, and kind of actually help you make a life change and feel less stressed about your money and feel in control.
I like that. And what are some of the criteria that the coaches have to meet in order to be on the platform?
Yeah, so right now we have about 20 coaches that are live on the platform, and all of those coaches have gone through kind of a course. So we actually offer these free courses to coaches in order to learn not only how to coach, but how to coach in zero-based budgeting, this method that we like, and also how to coach on our platform. So one of the cool things about our platform is we're trying to make coaching more accessible to people. So coaching by its nature is very expensive because when you're meeting one-on-one with somebody, that person's time is very valuable, right? And so, coaches are expensive to meet with. And so, what we've done is we've created this concept of a virtual coach. So, when you log into your app, you get kind of access to your coach in a virtual way. So, there's a little circle in the bottom, it's got your coach's face in it, and that coach can have conversations with you. And these conversations, they're not AI, it's not a bot. These are actually kind of huge flow charts of conversations that these coaches have created and written very intentionally. They kind of have their style, how they like to teach, how they like to guide people, and you as a user can interact with that at your own pace and on your own time, and basically for free. So if you want to have a one-on-one call with a coach, you can pay extra for that, but you still get all of that kind of built in for free.
Oh, I like that. That sounds really cool. How big are you now? Do you know how many users you have using the app?
Yeah, we're still just getting started. So we had like a soft launch at FinCon this past year. Are you familiar with FinCon?
Yes, I love FinCon. I go every
Okay,
year. It is, for those
cool.
who don't know, FinCon is a conference for money nerds like us. And we call it the place where money nerds and media meet, right? Like where we can meet people who are like minded and love to talk about personal finance, but then also brands who might be interested in helping you educate people about personal finance. So I love FinCon. I've been going since 2018 and I'm definitely
Nice.
going this year as well. So I love it. So tell me, how did the soft launch go? And what are some
Yeah,
things that we can look forward to if we hop in the app now?
yeah, so the soft launch went well. And any app that you're starting that kind of has two sides to it. So we have like the coaches and the user side. It's kind of like a chicken and the egg problem, right? Do you get the coaches first and then the users, or the users first and the coaches? So we chose to focus on coaches first. So we've talked to probably almost 100 coaches at this point who have been interested in the software in some way. We have about 65 in a Discord channel, people kind of networking and learning more about it. And then we've got 20 coaches that are launched on the platform. Those coaches are just kind of getting out there and getting started. So the users are just kind of starting. Most users are on a free trial currently, although we do, we are starting to get paid users as well. So it's a slow thing, but that's just kind of how startups work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Slow and steady wins the race. So keep running. You actually reminded me of one of the newest scriptures that I love, and I'm going to share it on the podcast today because I'm reading a new planner that one of my clients created for entrepreneurs. So if you're interested, check out the $1 Million Planner by Marketing by Monray. But here's the scripture that I like because she created a whole planner with scriptures for entrepreneurs. And there is one specifically about competition. So 1 Corinthians 9:24 says, "Do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one receives the prize? So run that you may obtain it." And I was like, you know what? The Bible says that I should work my hardest to win in entrepreneurship, or so be it. The context of that scripture, I'm going to run my best race. And so I love the fact that you are jumping out there. You started a company to help people budget better. You've narrowed in on one specific form of budgeting, which is zero-based budgeting, and you are helping people in the process. So I love what you're doing. Keep running your race. Zach, I really, really love it. But I did promise I would share one of my favorite ways to budget. So I love to budget with multiple bank accounts. I've tried zero-based budgeting. I've tried the 50, 30, 20 way to budget, but I like budgeting with multiple bank accounts because it allows me to compartmentalize my expenses in buckets that I can see and then also manage from different places. So the way that works, guys, is I have one central bank account where income comes in, and then we have other savings bank accounts where money goes to, right? And so I have a fund that's just for household expenses that are fixed, like the mortgage. And then I have another one for variable expenses that change, like utility bills. And each time we get paid, we transfer money from the incoming checking account to the savings accounts based on how much money we normally need on a monthly basis to pay our bills. And then I have the bills paid from those individual savings accounts. And I know it sounds complicated for some people who are like, I don't want to have to manage too many accounts. But for us, me and my husband, it helps us really keep track of our expenses. And all we have to do is set up the transfer and make sure that the bills are actually paid from those other checking accounts or savings accounts as we've designated. But we've been doing it for years. It's really helped us be able to segment all the traffic that comes in our checking account because most of it is just money coming in and then money flowing to the savings accounts we set up. And it's also helped us compartmentalize expenses so we can really see the areas where we've had significant changes over the last couple of years, whether it be because of inflation and the cost of food, or our mortgage and escrow changing because of increases in taxes. So those are some cool things that I like. But I don't, I'm not mad at you for having a better way to budget for you, because I do feel like budgeting is personal and you have to go with the one that works, but you have to find the budget that works for you. I also feel like you have to take time to practice the budgeting method that you're trying for more than 1 month. I don't think it's fair to try zero based budgeting for a month and then quit on it because you didn't like it, because you probably didn't practice it enough to really understand how it works. So we experimented at least 3 months with different ways to budget before we stuck with the one that works for us. What are some of your other tips for new couples when it comes to budgeting, and maybe even the first time of combining their finances?
Yeah, there's a lot of great stuff what you said in there. Um, First off, I will say what you guys do is kind of very similar to what software does as well. Software
Mm-hmm.
helps you divide up things into different categories, whereas you're doing the same thing. You're just putting them in different banks. So like you're
Mm-hmm.
still kind of doing the same philosophy. You're just using banks to be those envelopes instead of using like digital envelopes. So I like your method because it still kind of sticks to that same philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, as far as like tips for couples, um, so I share often like, well, my wife and I teach this class together usually when we teach it at church, which is fun because we get kind of both of our perspectives. But for us, it's really cool, especially when you're just getting started or you're just combining your finances, that you get to sit down and have a plan according to your shared values, right? So obviously, like I'm going to value some things and my wife's going to value different things, and they're going to be a little bit off or maybe way off, right? They're going to be like there's going to be differences in what we value. But when we have to put a number to each of these categories, we're coming to a compromise in each of these areas, right? We're saying, I know that you think we should spend this much. I think we should spend this. How do we feel about this much? And because we have a plan, because we set aside that money before we spend it, we're going to live according to those shared values. So to me, like working together with your spouse or with a partner on this is like awesome because it's a way to be a team together instead of fighting about money. It's a way to pre-plan it and actually feel like you're, together and you're arm in arm and you're out there spending your money in a way that aligns with what you care about.
Absolutely. I love it. And I love what you said, especially when finances is like one of the number one reasons couples fight or they have divorce, is because they can't come to an agreement on their finances, or they're committing what we call financial infidelity, right? When you have secret bank accounts, when you have secret debt, and then it comes to light and it just causes tension and friction in your marriage or in your relationship. So I strongly encourage couples to communicate, to talk about money. And it doesn't have to be the first date conversation, but it definitely should be, a part of you getting to know each other. One of my favorite things to do is have money dates with my husband. We had a money date the other day to talk about a plan for the next 6 months of the year and what are the things that we want to focus on before we do our next big venture together. And that was really fun because we bring out the spreadsheets, but we also made it fun. We had Mexican and margaritas, and just like tried to lighten the what could be a contentious conversation for some people, right? But because we were on the same page, we knew that, okay, at the end of the meeting we need to have a plan on how to spend this money that we've come into, and what are we going to put it on that helps further our goals, right? So I do feel like money dates are important, and they can be as often as you need, every time you get paid, once a month, or whatever works according to your family. And I think that's some really good stuff. So I have loved this conversation. I'm super grateful for you being on the show today, Zach. Before we leave, I want to ask you, one of my signature questions is about your purpose for money. The name of the podcast is called The Purpose of Money. So I want to know, what is your purpose for money?
Yeah, that's a hard one. Or actually, I think we have an answer for it recently because we've made this big leap to stop my job, right? At this point, we have no kind of stable income, although we do have some of these like rental things and stuff like that. So, what we've decided, what my wife and I have decided is that money to us is we want to spend it on trying to build something that helps other people, right? So
Mhm.
to me, like fire or the concept of being financially independent so that you can spend your time doing something you're passionate about, that you think will have a positive impact in the world, that's what I want to do. So when I think about saving up money as much as I can, the reason I want to have that money is so that I can spend it on periods like this where we're not going to make as much money because we're starting something new, but we want to be able to put ourselves in a position of strength so that we can try to help those in our community. And that's probably not always the case, right? But in this season of life, that's what money means to us.
I love it, and that's a great answer. Before you hop off, please let everyone know how can they check you out and where do we go to check out My Budget Coach?
Yeah, so you can go to the website. It's just mybudgetcoach.com. We're also on all the social medias. It's just at mybudgetcoachhq. There's just an HQ in the end of it. And yeah, follow us on social media or sign up for a free trial. It's a 35 day free trial, and you get kind of to pick your own coach, which is kind of fun. So go through the directory, find a coach that you like, and just give it a try.
I love it. You guys, I hope you check it out, mybudgetcoach.com, or check them out on social at mybudgetcoachhq. We will definitely include all the links in the show notes and encourage you to get your coach today and take advantage of the 35-day free trial. Zach, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been a pleasure talking to you about all things money, and I can't wait to see you at FinCon.
Yeah,
Bye
likewise.
bye.
See ya.